true humility is not thinking less of yourself, but thinking about yourself less. And it's something to really consider. Like, I remember the first time I heard that quote, I was like, huh, that's weird. Like, I don't really understand what he's talking about. And the older I get, the more experience I get, I think it's just 100% true. And so,
Hey, listeners, welcome back to the Value Bridge podcast. And today I'm really honored to be here with Brent Beshore. I think he's already a legend in the, private equity space, but Ian Castle has talked wonders about him in numerous interviews and public appearances. So I was really curious to know who is this Brent Beshore guy. Finally had the time to watch hours of his interviews, past interviews, I guess. And so today I'm really grateful to have him on the podcast. And yeah, Brent, why don't you say a couple of words before I bombard you with questions?
well, thanks for the kind intro. I think I'm way too young and inexperienced to be a legend, so I'm not sure what that says about me, but I certainly appreciate being on the podcast. So thanks for inviting me, David.
Nice. Okay, so first question I have for you is who is Brent? So how do you define yourself? And this is very simple but hard question, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, so I followed Jesus, so I'm first and foremost a follower of Jesus. I was a hardcore atheist in my 20s, and man, I tell you what, it's been the most remarkable transformation, change, and anyway, so I would say first and foremost follower of Jesus. I'm a husband, father to four kids. I've got three daughters and a son, and life is full. It's fantastic. So I would say those are probably the things that define me more than the business world. I'm also the founder and CEO of Permanent Equity. I joke that I'm the Forrest Gump of private equity because I never set out to do what we're doing. I just did the next thing. In fact, everything that I've ever tried to do intentionally has always failed, and seems like I get pulled into things, and things seem to work out. So grateful for the grace of God.
Yeah, I had some Forrest Gump question in my questions, in prepared questions, because it's my favorite movie, and so it's really funny that you compare yourself with Forrest Gump. He's like the best, so yeah. Anyway, my following question is: can you talk about this blueprint system and how it has worked for you so far since implementation? And also, where did you get the inspiration from? And I guess we are jumping straight into business, but
Yeah.
we also have some other questions related to life in general. So yeah, let's prime ourselves for those ones with the business ones before. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So maybe to back up, so Blueprint is just our strategic planning process and documentation internally here at Permanent Equity. We actually rolled it out last year. We've been using various strategic planning systems. We have some of our companies use EOS. There's a lot of them out there. There's nothing magic about any one system. I would say what we've noticed over doing this for 15 years. So I bought the first business in February of 2010. So yeah, so we're over 15 years in at this point. And it gives you a lot of opportunity to see what works and what doesn't. We've screwed up a ton, learned, paid a lot of tuition, let's put it that way. And I think Blueprint for us is the most simplified, flexible system to be able to take any company. So we have 16 companies in our portfolio. They range in size, they range in geography, in industry, in complexity. And so we're trying to take a single system that we could take all of those companies and help them to really just say, okay, what are we trying to do? Why are we here? Where are we going? What are the steps going to be to get to there? And how do we measure success and failure? And as dumb as that sounds, success has 1,000 fathers and failure's an orphan. We found that couldn't be more true. And it's so easy to, I don't know if you've ever seen the cartoon of the king who's shooting the arrows, and then he's got his servant like drawing the bullseyes around the arrows wherever they go. It's so easy to do that in business. And especially when you get 16 businesses and you're trying to keep track of, okay, what did we say 6 months ago about this one or that one, or how does this all work? And so Blueprint process is just our way of getting organized. It dovetails in with our board system. So we form internal boards of directors, and we will probably start inviting outside directors soon. We haven't actually done that yet, but it just really dovetails all together and creates a unified system to be able to help us keep track of and just organize the companies in our portfolio.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so maybe just taking one step back, what exactly is your investment criteria? And do you have favorite industries or niches you like to go into? Because
Yeah.
I feel like maybe we jump right into the business, and people that are not familiar with permanent cap equity would be a bit confused, right? So
Yeah. Maybe we even back up further. So the name permanent equity is for a reason. So I think we're the longest dated private equity fund in the history of the industry. So we have a 30-year initial term on our capital. And really, that allows us to do a couple things that most private equity firms can't do. So one, we buy with no intention of selling the business, which may not sound like a big deal, but it's a really big deal because you can't make good long-term decisions with short-term capital. If you and I are going to be in business together for 3 to 4 years, which is kind of the average holding period for a private equity firm, we're gonna treat each other differently than we would if we say, hey, we're going to enter into this partnership and we hope it exists in 15, 20, 30 years. Being long term, I think, is one of the greatest advantages you can have. Now, it doesn't mean you never sell a business. We can talk about that. I know that you've got Buffett in the background there in a picture, and he's never sold a business. At least that's what he says, right? And I think that there's a big difference in why you'd want to sell, and maybe there's some good reasons to sell and bad reasons to sell. And so, having the opportunity though not to sell really creates the fundamental, the soil, I would call it, for good relationship and for the compounding to happen. If you want to interrupt that intentionally, whether there's an opportunity to sell for the right reasons, interrupt that compounding, totally fine. There's nothing wrong with selling. There's no moral issue to it, but you certainly never want to be a forced buyer or a forced seller. And so that's the other part of our what we've created, permanent equity. So not only do we have a 30-year fund life, we have a 10-year investment period. And so that allows us to never be a forced buyer. So we tell our LPs, hey, we're not a vintage of fund model. We're not, when you buy a stake in one of our funds, you're not competing against that vintage against other private equity funds in that style. Like we're trying to generate absolute return. We're trying to only do good deals. And that sounds dumb. Like for people outside the industry, they're like, well, yeah, of course you only do want to do good deals. It's like, well, it's actually not how the private equity world works. In reality, most private equity firms have to deploy capital within a fairly short period of time, no matter what market conditions are, because they have to then churn it and get it back to their LPs within a short period of time. And so it creates really a forced buyer and a forced seller situation. And I just think we get a huge advantage from not having either of those. I would say the last thing that makes us unusual is our fee structure. So we take no fees of any kind, no reimbursements of any kind. Literally, there's no cash that comes from the LPs or the portfolio companies to us, the GP, outside of we take a percentage of free cash flow above a hurdle as we return it back to the investors. And what this does is it perfectly aligns our interests up and down the stack. So our incentives are exactly the same as our investors. If there's a great place to take especially pre-tax dollars and generate a return on those high return, high probability reinvestments, we'd be idiots not to do that, right? I mean, if you and I were in partnership together and we said, hey, we have $1 million left over, we could either distribute it out and like you go buy a boat and I'll go buy a house or whatever, or we could take that $1 million and we know a place where we could put it pre-tax where we could generate a 40% return on our invested capital. What would you say? You'd say, of course, take the money. I mean, gosh, I for sure don't want it, right? And so works the exact same way with permanent equity. If we've got a great place to put capital to reinvest it at high rates of return, we want to do that. We have every incentive to do that. And so do our portfolio companies who are incentivized the same way as we are. And if, by the way, the worst possible thing you can do is if you have capital at the end of the year and you say, hey, there's really nothing great to do with it, but we feel like we got to retain it because if you're not growing, you're dying, and all these platitudes that get thrown out there. The worst possible thing you could do is have that attitude, because then you're going to murder money. You're going to generate a terrible return on invested capital. In fact, we've seen this often with companies when we see that we look at buying is they're taking capital from projects that are generating really great returns on capital and then taking them and putting them into things that are generating terrible returns on capital. So I would say those are the kind of the unusual things about what makes permanent equity different. So long time horizon. We don't have to be a forced buyer, forced seller, very unusual fee model. And then we just really ultimately try to treat people as made in the image of God. That's the biggest thing. We try to treat people as humans. They're not a means to an end. They are the end in themselves. We're all trying to generate great returns through being excellent. We're trying to be kind, not nice to people. And being kind doesn't always mean just rolling over and doing whatever somebody says. Of course not, right? We want to be kind, which is tell people the truth. And we want to strive for excellence because that's what we're called to do. But yeah, I say that's kind of a flyover of what makes us unusual.
Nice. And I think I asked two questions in there, and maybe yeah, it was too confusing. But could you explain if you have any favorite industry or niches?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I would say is we don't have a favorite. I would say we have some areas that we don't prefer. So we don't know what the price of commodities should be. We're not experts on commodities. So the more things track a specific commodity, whether it's oil or copper or lumber or something like that, like we're going to try to hedge out of that as quickly as we can. We're going to try to use some stuff to be, I would say neutral to the commodity. So anything that's really dependent upon the price of a commodity, and you're kind of riding those cycles up and down, we're going to probably be a little bit hesitant to get into that. Of course, everything echoes, various inputs into the system. It's a complex, adaptive system, but we don't like things that are just really pegged to one thing itself, right? So we're probably not going to get into oil exploration as an example, and we're sensitive to areas I would say are highly specialized tribal knowledge. So using it as another example, I've said this on other podcasts, but like, I had a friend one time tell me, he's like, hey, look, if you ever see an oil deal come out of Texas, just know I passed on it twice. And I think about that a lot, right? There's certain industries where you're like, there's a lot of expertise built into the system. And if somebody else is a buyer of this thing and I don't have that expertise, you got to ask yourself, why am I the lucky one that's getting this opportunity? And so, I mean, we always ask that question broadly, but specifically in industries that are, I would call high specialization, we're going to be particularly sensitive to. So, outside of that, I mean, we look at everything. We think there are interesting niches in every industry. We think there are interesting moats that get either stumbled upon or maybe intentionally built, depending on the situation. And so we're willing to look at a lot of things. If you look at our current portfolio, we've got aerospace, manufacturing, construction, a lot of business services. We've got government work that we do. I mean, it really just spans the entire spectrum. And we're all in the United States, but we're coast to coast in terms of where the portfolio companies are. So we're able to travel anywhere. We're in Missouri, so it's the map behind me here. We're right in the middle of the United States, and so we can get to either coast quickly. And we like to play nationally. So
Nice, nice. And maybe you could explain a bit better the structure you have where companies send back the money to the LPs or the free cash flow. Because I'm not entirely sure I understood how you fund new acquisitions or new businesses you're going to
yeah.
buy. So maybe, yeah, you could explain that a bit better.
Yeah, I probably didn't do a very good job. It may take me a little. I'm a little slow, so you have to give me a few tries out of here. Yeah, so we raise funds that we pool our capital with other people's capital. We raise funds, and then whenever we make an acquisition, we take the funds out of that fund
Hmm.
and invest it into the company. So
Okay.
that's where all the new capital comes. Now, when we own a company, hopefully, if we did our job right, it's generating cash and hopefully more cash every year after we buy it, right?
Hmm.
We take those cash flows, and the first thing we do with those cash flows is we say, okay, what are the high probability, high return investments that we can make? Hopefully, again, pre-tax. And again, in our structure, we'd be idiots not to do those. Like we want it to be obvious that we should reinvest that capital, and so we do that. And in our portfolio, we probably, on average, across the portfolio, some companies are more than others. We're probably reinvesting 70 to 75%, or excuse me, we're probably investing uh, 30, 25 to 30% of the capital, and then we're
Okay.
distributing out the remainder. So
Hmm.
70 to 75% of the capital we don't have a great place to put it. And then when we don't have a great place to put it, we pull it up, the companies in the portfolio, pull them up, and then we send it out to investors as distributions.
Okay, got it. Perfect. Now, reading your 2024 annual letter, I did a rough calculation. It looks like your cash returns on capital are around 21%. So I'm curious to know how well that is tracking with the internal targets. Like, just not to, I'm not asking what your internal targets are, but I just want to know how does reality match with plans? And do you use that yardstick for how well you're doing at allocating capital, or are there any preferred metrics?
Yeah, I mean, look, you can't lie with cash. Another thing I don't
Hmm.
think I mentioned before is we don't use debt. So yeah, I mean, I think I said in the letter we're in the low 20s in terms of cash on cash returns,
Hmm.
um, without selling the business. So
Hmm.
that's through distributions, and if you kind of do the math on the amount of cash that we are distributing out versus the percentage of cash that we're reinvesting, I mean, yeah, the returns have been quite good. And then of course you've got underlying appreciation of the asset underneath that isn't accounted for in the cash returns because we haven't sold anything yet.
Hmm.
So yeah, I mean, I would say roughly internally we target a 30% minimum rate of return on all our
Hmm.
investments. And yeah, I mean, historically we've exceeded that fairly dramatically. So we've been blessed to to have done pretty well to date.
Nice. And I recently reread Thinking Fast and Slow, and they talk about this like planning fallacy where you always act a bit over optimistic when you plan for things and set out targets. So how does this work in your own experience? Like I guess Blueprint is kind of a way to attack that, but yeah, just curious to know how has worked for you in your personal experience.
Yeah, I would say my personal experience matches what was found in that book, which is,
Hmm.
you always overestimate what you can get done,
Hmm.
especially in short periods of time. Things always cost more. There's a lot of friction in the system. I mean, look, maybe to reduce it down to first principles, it's like we're all messy humans. When messy humans interact with one another, it's a mess. Companies are just collections of messy people that are interacting with one another. So you probably
Hmm.
should expect things are going to be pretty messy. And yeah, I would say I found that to be true. We when we do our planning, we try to be very reasonable in what we plan. Also knowing that we want to aim for excellence. Like that's also not an excuse not to go hard and go after it and try
Hmm.
to be excellent at what you do. It's just knowing that in your pursuit of excellence that there's likely going to be a lot of twisting and turning, and I mean it's not a straight line, and
Hmm.
so, you should just be aware of that. And so, I remember early in my career, I'd often get surprised at, how many bad, weird things happened. And now it's kind of a miracle. I like look at the world around us. And of course, I'm going to say this very broadly, but like,
Yeah.
knowing what's in my heart more and having seen and interacted with a lot of people in depth, it's kind of a miracle that we have like a functioning society,
Yeah.
considering how messy we are. So I would say is that there's actually a lot to be grateful for, even in the
Mhm.
midst of pandemics and wars and all the political drama we've got going on.
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely very interesting. People are so complex. We are so complex. But I wanted to go back to something you said before. So you said Buffett, at least he says that he never sold a business. And I found in my own experience of studying Buffett and many of the great investors that they arrive at some conclusions late in their investment career, and then people maybe that are starting out kind of apply them, even though maybe that's not exactly what they did in the early days. So I'm curious to know what are some of the most widely accepted investing principles that you think that from experience turn out to be inaccurate, or at least for small companies don't apply quite as well.
Well, I mean, I think it's interesting when you talk about Buffett in particular. He's gone through at least five major evolutions. That you can kind of, as you study the letters and his communication pattern and style over the years, five distinct kind of phases that he's gone through. And it's funny because on the other side of every phase, he always kind of talks about how the thing that he just got done doing isn't the way to do things, which is how we all work, right? One of the things that he's very famous for saying is just buy good businesses and leave them alone, right? And I think that's one of those where people get their arms around it and say, oh, well, shoot, I should just go buy good businesses. And one that presupposes that you know what a good business is. And I got to tell you, the advice I'd give to anybody who's going to start looking at buying a small to medium sized business is, look at 500 of them before you decide on buying one of them. You got to get a good flavor and taste and understand all the nuances. There's so much nuance that goes beyond looking at the financials and modeling it out. And so, yeah, I would say if you look at Buffett's career, he has been extremely involved in the businesses, and it is for certain not the truth that he just bought good businesses and left them alone. Now, later in his career, when you've got billions and billions of dollars of capital, you have no ability to. First of all, he's not going to be a better operator than the top-notch operators that he's going to be hiring and employing at these large companies. So as you move up the food chain in terms of the quality of business, he's probably a better operator than 99% of the people operating, call it businesses under $10 million of free cash flow. And so when he was really small and he had very little capital, or he had the ability, the desire, and the time capacity to do it, he was extremely involved. I mean, you look at Buffalo News, you look at Dempster Mills, Sanborn Maps. I mean, there's tons of examples of him dramatically intervening in these companies. And by the way, for the good of the company. I mean, he did a great job at understanding the strategy that would lead them to a better place. And so to his credit, I think that this is where the aw shucks, sort of your favorite uncle from Omaha thing betrays him. He's a incredibly shrewd operator, and for most of his career, prior to becoming a billionaire for all intents and purposes, he was I would say argue as much an operator and an interventionist as he was investor. Now he's really good at both, but honestly, I think he's as good of an operator in many ways than he is an investor. So I'd say that's a good example of one where, for God's sakes, do not like read the Berkshire letters that are later in his career and then say, oh, well, I'm just going to apply that to small businesses. Like small businesses don't run themselves. There is lots of challenges. There is no quote unquote mailbox money in small business world. It just does not exist. I promise you.
Mm-hmm. And can you also speak for competitive advantages? Because, for example, I'm a microcap investor, right? And most of the times I pitch my ideas to larger cap investors is, okay, what's the competitive advantage? And I tell them like, look, it's very hard for like a 10 million market cap business, or I don't know, 20 million, to have a really strong and long-term competitive advantage. And so I'm curious to know what's your view on that.
I would actually argue that I don't know if that's true. I would argue that I think there are some really unusual niches that you can carve out that are just frankly not attractive at scale.
Mm-hmm.
And this is another Buffett quote that drives people absolutely insane. Is I think once was quoted as saying, if he had $1 million, he would have a 50% return on invested capital.
Yeah.
Right. And so everyone that has $1 million or less is like, well, clearly my benchmark is I should be generating a 50% return on capital, right?
Yeah.
and look, the reality is you can, with small amounts of money, generate higher returns. Like it is absolutely 100% true that returns will decrease for the most part, and there are exceptions to this. There's network effects. There's things that can not have this be true, but those are the exceptions, not the rule. As you gain more capital, frankly, you've got more stuff to worry about. You've got attention spread over a wider field of view. There's more things that go wrong, more distractions. There's a lot of reasons. But the reality is that it's very difficult to scale. And as you scale, you're going to lose some advantages in that scale. And so I think that actually smaller companies, most of them don't have sustainable long-term advantages. And it's way easier to lose all of your money in small companies than it is larger companies. Even in the public markets. But there are real advantages to certain companies that are sustainable over long periods of time. A lot of those usually have to do with regional moats and relationships. And then finding out, having carved off some tiny little niche that's not big enough to be attractive to somebody larger, but isn't also something that people can get into easily. And so you find these little protected, spots in the market, and that's what we try to do. I mean, it's literally what my job is to help find these little protected spots in the market and run them for a long time.
Mm, cool. Yeah, actually have so many places I want to go to, but one of the things that I'm curious about is how does your actually day to day look like? Because I guess you already scaled your organization to a point where most of the things or some of the things you are delegating to other people, and you also have this structure where you have some shared services within your firm and so on and so forth. So I'm curious to know what's your actual job right now? So making sure things work well, like what is
Yeah,
it?
what would you say you do here? That's a great question. Yeah, so I think that look, I consider the pinnacle of leadership to be you're always useful and never necessary, and
Mhm.
I try to live that out. And I would say that to anybody who's in leadership, you should wake up every day and you should be brutally honest with yourself about where you're necessary and really work hard to remove the necessity of your involvement and hire people, frankly, who are better at the thing than you are. I've done every job at Permanent Equity through the years, and I am very comfortable saying that the people we have doing those things now are way better than I ever was at them. And so, what does my day look like? I mean, it depends on what's on fire. It depends on where the opportunities are. I am rarely necessary these days, thankfully. But I try to be useful every day and just see where I'm called into and see where I can be helpful in supporting the team. Involved in a lot of the new business development efforts, involved in most of the hiring decisions, especially at the senior level. Involved in portfolio company executive teams and setting the boards. I mean, I was very involved and helped architect the blueprint strategy that we rolled out last year. And it just really depends. Trying to be a good father and a good husband and a good friend to people and see where the Lord takes me.
Cool. Okay. Um, and going back to a point you made earlier, you talk about like centralization versus decentralization in the sense of like letting the businesses do their own thing and not being actively involved. So I'm curious to know like how how does it play out in your own case? Do you actually try to be involved, or do you stay out of the day to day decisions or things like that?
Yeah, well, so okay, let's again maybe take a step back. Like I think there's two ways that you largely can operate small companies. Since that's what we're talking about today, I'll just kind of reserve my judgment only for small companies. I think this is true. You either need to be making the decisions and basically have a team executing on the decisions you're making, which is, if you're the investor in the business, you are the CEO for all intents and purposes. And maybe you've got a general manager or multiple general managers who are doing some management of the execution of your vision, but you are providing the vision and you are creating the strategy and you're dictating kind of the executional tactical level. And then you have a group of people around you who are carrying forward on that execution. So that's one. That's very much you're involved in the business day to day. All the decisions run through you. You are the judgment for the business. The other direction is you are dictating almost nothing other than the broad strategy, and you're setting guardrails for the business, and you're saying, I trust the leadership team and empower the leadership team to even create the strategy underneath maybe the broadest strategy, and then maybe being informed of it or maybe checking off on it, and then they are responsible for the day-to-day execution. As soon as you exit from one of those two places, you are in the danger zone. And I know this because we did this for a long time. These days we very much are setting as board of directors for these companies. We are setting strategy in concert with the CEO. We're all just making decisions on where are we, where do we want to go, why do we want to go there, and then very broadly, what are the KPIs that would indicate that we've been there or not? What are the things we're really trying to drive forward? At that point, we're here to support the CEOs, but they should be successful, and these companies should be independent of us successful. We do not step into day-to-day leadership. That's not our job. That's their job. If we are stepping into day-to-day leadership, it usually means that we're augmenting for a short period of time something that the company needs. whether it's in a time of crisis or a time of abundance. And both of those things are stressful, right? I mean, one of the most dangerous times for any business is when they're growing rapidly. And I've seen companies grow themselves to death, making terrible decisions in a time of abundance. And so, we've experienced both ends of that. And I would say is for the most part, we design an operating box. And that's that blueprint really is an operating box and says, hey, as long as you're operating within these parameters and everything's going fine within the box, you have free reign to do whatever you need to do. When you start stepping outside the box, the design of the system, I think that's where we get more involved and again, try to be helpful. And so, that's our day to day. They can always call us. I mean, we have all kinds of things, weird things happen literally every day across a portfolio of 16 companies. And we try to be available to be helpful however we can. But in terms of being proactive and day-to-day involved, it's only when things are outside the box.
Got it. Okay, so now let's talk a bit about deal making because I feel like it's a very interesting part of what you do. And from what I understand, relationship building is a key aspect of your investment process at least. But I figured a while ago that there's this number, I don't know if it's accurate or not, but that basically states you can only have 150 relationships at a given time. So
Dunbar.
how yeah, exactly. So how do you build and maintain relationships? And I know you're focused on long-term relationships. So how do you build and maintain long-term relationships with high quality individuals?
Yeah, I mean, well, first of all, 150 is a lot of people to be in relationship with. If you think
Yeah,
about that,
true.
to be in real relationship with 150 people is kind of crazy.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, I mean, I would say um, the actual number of maintained relationships that I have certainly does not exceed 150 at any given time. And
Hmm.
look, I mean, I have a good friend of mine who says, hey, some friends are for a reason, some friends are for a season, and some friends are for a lifetime, and you never know who's in what bucket until after it's done, right?
Hmm.
And so, very much, open to however long the relationship should be ongoing, and what is a relationship, right? It's an opportunity for me to serve you and for you to serve me, and for me to elevate your care over mine.
Hmm.
It's the opposite of transaction. Now, I would argue that I'm not in a friendship, right, with a lot of the people that I'm in business with. I mean, I care about them, but we're there to do a job and to execute on it. And I want to treat them as made in the image of God and treat them with care and with excellence. But we're there to do a job together. And we want to get the job done, and we want to do. We want their job to be done in a way that helps them as humans. But I'm not in deep friendship with all of our CEOs. There's no way for that to happen, right? In terms of the deal making aspect of it, really what you're trying to do in deal making when it comes to relationship is you're trying to understand the person to the degree that you can predict their behavior. In a deal, I mean, how is somebody going to react? And we all have our weird, quibbles and oddities about how we work. We're all contradictions. We're all hypocrites in some ways. And so you're trying to understand where is somebody consistent, where are they inconsistent, and how much do the principles of their lives, like what are they really operating on? And look, a lot of the way that the world tells us is get as much as you can, as quickly as you can from whoever you can. Don't worry about burning relationships. People are there to be used. I mean, that is the way of the world. And so, I want to be particularly tuned in to understanding what do they say, what are their behaviors, how well does it line up, and sort of just what is their operating, what is their worldview, their operating life philosophy. Now, it doesn't mean that everyone is going through some moral purity test, and I'm not here to even say that I'm morally pure, right? I'm here to say that I want to understand what people are striving towards. What do they think the good life is? What does it mean to be a good person in their eyes? And I think if you strip away a lot of the talk, unfortunately, most people are fearful. Most people are scared they're not going to have enough, are scared they're not going to be enough. And so, in many ways, work and deals in particular are a way to be something and to secure for themselves, an identity in all of this. And I think it just gets into dangerous territory. You just got to be aware of it and understand kind of what the person's trying to do, and then adjust for that. And whether it's adjust deal terms, but the more the predictability of the person you can know, even if it's predictably maybe negative in some ways, at least you can work around it. I think where we get into the biggest danger is when somebody presents themselves as X and they really are Y. And sometimes it's intentional. Sometimes they're intentionally trying to deceive, but oftentimes it's not. Oftentimes they really do want to be X. They just aren't X, and they're aspirationally X, but they really are Y. And when push comes to shove, they're going to act in a very different way than what they talk about. And so I think that's what we're really trying to suss out. It's just understand who the person really is, predict their behavior. I mean, that is really what brand is the prediction of outcomes within a range. It's sort of, if you think about it in math terms, it's like standard deviations from a norm. And that's what we're really trying to understand is what is the person's norm, and then what are the standard deviations from the norm, and what do those standard deviations look like?
Mm-hmm. Cool. Yeah, you also talked a bit about maintaining these relationships and setting aside 5 to 10 hours a week to send emails, make phone calls, and so on. And I read it and I said like, wow, that sounds really great. But what do I tell them? What do I say? What do I do? Right. So, how does it look like for you, like maintaining and doing this maintenance work on those relationships? I guess you're getting back to sellers that maybe you talked at some point and weren't ready and so forth and so on. So maybe you can explain that a bit
Yeah,
better.
yeah. I would say is how, I think the question is what's the tactics, like how do I maintain relationships, or what am I doing to be
Yeah, yeah.
in
Like,
relationship?
what do you say in these emails or phone calls to people?
Yeah,
Like, because
yeah.
sometimes it can sound a bit like cold, right?
Yeah, well, so one, people can tell if you actually genuinely care about them or not.
Mm-hmm.
This is the funny thing. No matter what you think you're pulling the wool over people's eyes, like people are very finely tuned into how you make them feel. People
Mm-hmm.
forget what you actually say. People do not forget how you make them feel.
Yeah.
And so people can tell, do you really care or not? And so, I mean, if I have an interaction, I had an interaction with a seller this week where they came to visit me, and we learned a lot about one another. What do they care about? What's going on in their family life? Who are they actually as a human? And so my follow up with them is going to be around establishing actually a meaningful relationship with them. Who are they, and when can we see each other next? And let me follow up on how's their marriage doing, or how's their kids sports that we got to start talking about. And because I genuinely care about them, because that's what they're interested in. So you have to make the decision of like, are you just trying to do that to get something from them? I mean, that's incredibly transactional. Again, this is the sort of the business development, again, way of the world is like, hey, fake that you care, and then maybe people will buy from you. It doesn't work. It just doesn't work. And people can see right through it. You actually have to care. And if you don't care, it's actually better to say, I don't care, and like, don't talk about that stuff. But I do genuinely care. I'm really interested in people. And I think that everyone's got something to teach me. I believe everyone's made in the image of God. And C.S. Lewis has a great quote on this. He said, if you could see people for who they really were, you'd be tempted to worship them. I think there's really something special in that. Is every single person that you look into their eyes, there's something unusual. There's something different about them.
Yeah.
And I want to get to know that. I want to get to know them. I'm curious about people.
Yeah. It's funny because sometimes it just looks like you don't have any mental capacity to just, I don't know, just taking in everyone's life story, because everyone has like a baggage, I guess, of positive and bad stuff. And so, how, this is a very hard question, and I don't even know how to frame it well. But how do you keep yourself ready and available? Because I mean, it takes a lot of energy, right, to be like available and I guess being in relationship with people, because it's everything about exchanging energies, positive and bad, and so on and so forth. So yeah,
Yeah,
just I don't know if I framed it correctly or whatever, but
I think I know exactly what you're saying. Yeah, well, so again, to quote C.S. Lewis, he says that true humility is not thinking less of yourself, but thinking about yourself less. And it's something to really consider. Like, I remember the first time I heard that quote, I was like, huh, that's weird. Like, I don't really understand what he's talking about. And the older I get, the more experience I get, I think it's just 100% true. And so the more that I can forget myself, and the more that I can forget what am I worried about, what we use so much mental energy thinking about what do I want and how do I get it and what do I not have and why do I not have it, that, and we're so, Blaise Pascal calls it incurvature. So it's when you're curved in on yourself, when you can't see outward, all you can do is see inward. And you can tell when you see people and they're lightly irritable and kind of jittery, and they're just trying to get something. And by the way, oftentimes it's not get something like money; it's just get affirmation. They're constantly craving something from the other person. And for me, when I'm in that mode, which is, by the way, more often than I want to be, I can't really see the other person because I'm so focused on myself. I can't see past my own eyes. And so the only way I know to increase the capacity to actually see people and try to care for them is to forget about yourself, not be worried about if you're going to be okay. Am I enough? Am I going to have enough? And of course, this is where my faith comes in a tremendous amount. I mean, this is where my 20s, I was a freaking disaster because all I could see was my own needs. I felt so needy and I felt like I didn't have what I needed. And it had nothing to do with material things. It was just this deep ache in me. And as I rest in the Lord, that largely goes away, and I'm able to focus on other people and try to be somebody who brings heaven to earth. I mean, that's what I'm trying to do. And I fail constantly, and I gotta say sorry to a lot of people, but at least that's my aim. That's what I'm trying to do. So
Yeah. Yeah, I think if I had to extract one word from what you said, it's all about like not having an ego, I guess. That frees up a lot of space mentally for other people. And I've been trying myself for years now to kind of figure out ways. Obviously, sometimes it goes better than other times, but to kind of keep my ego in place and really nurture my humility. I don't know how much of that is a skill and can be learned, other like than just pure nature of your personality. But I know this is very like philosophical type question, but I'm just curious to know, uh, like how or like what have you learned about managing your ego? Because I guess you've done a lot of work on that, from what I've learned from you so far. So yeah, just curious to know that.
yeah, well, okay. So when we talk about the ego, usually it manifests out of fear, right?
Hmm.
So we all have fears. The world's a scary place. I mean, let's just be honest, right? There's a lot of things that can hurt us, and depending on what story we're living into, I think a lot of it's the narrative that we live in. This is where in my 20s, I mean, my narrative was I came from nothing and I'm going to nothing, I'm destined for nothing. Um, I mean, I can make meaning in this world, but there's no objective meaning. There's no objective morality. I was kind of in the new atheism, Hitchens Dawkins line of thinking, and that it's really hard not to get to nihilism on that path. And so, what is ego? Ego in fear. We have to make one of two moves. We have to go to self protection or self promotion, right? So we either have to shut out everything in self protection and sort of build a wall around ourselves and isolate ourselves, or out of self promotion, we have to say, hey, look at all the things I'm good at. Look at who I am. I want to be seen, and I need to be known for all the good things. I want to hide all the bad things. And so what we end up doing is we end up creating this mask around ourselves, where we present to the world something that's not true. It's not who we really are, but it's who we want to, who we think the world wants us to be. And how by putting on the mask we can be safer because we're not exposed. And the reality is that is the only way to ensure that you deaden your heart and that you don't live a full life. It's like the only way to do it. Like, guaranteed that if you do that, you will live a miserable life. And look, I think this is the hard work of trying to peel away those masks and like, hey, why do I feel the need in these certain situations to be presenting myself in such a way that people admire me, or I care what people think. I mean, even right now, I mean, I'm trying to battle it. This is being recorded, right? Other people are going to listen to this. I'm like, oh man, am I saying something that's stupid? I wonder if I'm coming across as, articulate. Well, why do I need to feel the need to be articulate? And so there's this constant battle that, in fear, we move in one of those two directions. And so, um, the ego, I think, is our way of saying, oh my gosh, I'm not enough. I'm not going to have enough. What do I need? And we all desire to matter and belong. That's the core fundamental need. And so we have to be in relationship. We can't see ourselves clearly. And that's where, God gives us relationship for one another to be able to help one another. We're not meant to be islands. We're not meant to be isolated. And really, the ego is laying down, uh, or humility, I should say, is laying down the ego, laying down this need and this fear that I'm not enough, that I may not be enough, and saying, "Hey, I'm going to rest in something." Now, for me, I'm resting in what God tells me who I am. Right? This is where I don't. I went from being an atheist, so I'm gonna say. I mean, I've studied a lot of other world religions, a lot of other philosophies. Um, I I could never get there on my own. And I think it's really difficult because it's like, depending on the story you're in, if you really fundamentally believe that we came from nothing and are going to nothing, and however many billions of years will be heat death and nothing we did matters, you can say, hey, I'm going to create my own meaning, I'm going to create my own security, but really all that is that self-reliance. And we're fallible humans, and we're going to die, and we're kind of rotting as we go. And I mean, we're all deeply broken and messy. And so, I think that's where what I love about when I was rescued by the Lord is I was shown the depravity of who I am, and what I'm capable of is actually, when I stare into it, is way worse than I ever thought it would be. And simultaneously, I'm told that God loves me and has rescued me, and not only like loves me enough to forgive me, but actually makes me a son. Like I'm royalty. I'm a son of the Most High King, and I'm given an ambassadorship to go out and be an agent of the kingdom of God. I mean, that's incredible. Like, but both are held in tension, right? Because if you just are if you're without that faith, and you just look at who you really are and stare deeply into what your capacity for evil and for brokenness is, it's just depressing. I mean, I don't know how. It's like, that's where I could not see myself for who I really was when I was an atheist, because anytime I went down that, the amount of pain that I experienced and the anxiety I experienced was too great. And so I don't frankly know what it looks like outside of faith to lay down your ego and to quote unquote be humble in yourself. I mean, I don't know how to self-reliance your way into humility. I could never do it. And I've not seen anybody else do it. But I'm not going to foreclose off that that's not other people out there doing it. I just haven't seen it. So,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, you can only speak for yourself, I guess. Uh, I have here a quote, and it's my favorite quote of yours. So it says, "My life is a testimony to how someone can be so wrong so often, be so slow to catch on, and somehow be constantly surprised by unmerited blessings." Forrest Gump is my favorite movie for a reason. So Forrest Gump is also my favorite movie, as I said before.
you have good
And
taste.
yeah, and I like this quote because it's kind of I think it came, or at least I sense that it came, one of those moments of gratefulness where you just like yeah, get really grateful about your life and everything like that. But at the same time, it feels like it removes a bit of your agency in how you, yeah, and how your life turned out to be. And I'm wondering whether you ever experienced imposter syndrome, or if you had, like, how do you deal with it? Because it happens sometimes that, for example, when two or three things go really my way and I have no challenge in doing it, uh, then I feel like this was too easy. Now I don't deserve it, or like I don't know, like something will happen. So yeah, just curious to know your thoughts.
Well, okay. So, I work hard. I'm not saying grace and hard work are not opposed,
Mm-hmm.
right? Grace and earning are opposed, right? What
Mm-hmm.
I'm saying is that I know um, I've been given certain talents, no doubt, um, physical talents, physical capacity, intellectual capacity, emotional capacity.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, for sure. What I'm saying is I didn't self make myself. Like I
Mm-hmm.
didn't design the skills and the things I have.
Right.
If I look at the opportunities I've been given, it's a chance meeting here. It's a conversation with somebody there. It's stumbling on where do thoughts come from, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not to say that there's no agency. Like I very much believe that we're given free will, right? And this goes back from a theological perspective to, without free will, there's no love because you can't love your captor,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so, in order for there to be real love in this world, there has to be the free will to choose love, to love the other. And so, I
Mm-hmm.
firmly believe that we have free will. I also believe that somehow, and this is kind of like, light is both a wave and a particle. Do we understand
Mm-hmm.
how that works? No, we don't. You
Mm-hmm.
look at light one way, it's a wave. You look at another, it's a particle. I very much believe we have free will, and I also believe that everything passes through God's fingers, and ultimately God weaves things together in the course of history, right, to accomplish His ends. And that's the most beautiful thing because all I'm called to do is to take and what's given to me, my talents, whatever treasure, whatever relationships I have, lay it down and say, Lord, help instruct me. What do you want me to do with this? And I want to be a good steward of it. I know it's not mine. Like I don't own permanent equity. Technically, by the law, I own permanent equity, but I
Mm-hmm.
know I don't own it, and I know I didn't deserve it, and I know I didn't just through the sheer force of my will and in self reliance
Mm-hmm.
build it. Like I know too much. Like I was there. I know what an
Mm-hmm.
idiot I am. And I know what the bad decisions I made, right? Now, did I
Mm-hmm.
also make good decisions? Of course. Did I also work hard? Of course. Did I
Mm-hmm.
sacrifice things to get to where we are today? Of course. Do I deserve it? Of course not. Right. And I think this is where you got to hold both of those again in tension is the greatest position you can be in is to enjoy the gifts that God gives you and to think you deserve nothing because you don't,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like you don't. As
Mm-hmm.
soon as you start to deserve things, then it's like, well, if those get taken away or threatened, then somebody's harming you, right? If you can be
Right.
open-handed and you can hold things loosely, and you can say, hey, it's all a gift, and I'm going to trust that whatever comes my way is passed through the fingers of the Lord. Like it really makes this world so much more beautiful and bright and relaxed. And man, my masks that I wear and my false self, I am tense and controlling and difficult and sharp edged. And when I can just say, hey, look, like uh, today I want to go participate in whatever is there for me to do. I want to work hard and I want to do the work to, but leave the outcomes to God. That's where I've just seen my life just explode in every way.
Mm. Okay. Yeah, perfect. I think as we are approaching the end of this wonderful conversation, I just want to go back to a few questions I had more on the business side because I have a good friend of mine out of Australia, and he bought his first business. And yeah, he sent in a question that I think is really interesting. So, how do you think about buying a business using your own cash, seller financing, and debt, versus raising money from investors along with seller financing and debt? In other words, how do you weigh keeping more ownership by using more debt versus taking on investors and giving up some equity?
Yeah, it depends on what your goals are. And it depends on when you want to accomplish that. It depends on the authority that you want to have, the decision making you want to have. Anytime you add other people's money into the equation, money comes attached to people. So money is
Mhm.
technically a commodity, but it's never actually a commodity because money comes attached to people, and people
Mhm.
are messy and human and injecting their own stuff into the matters, right?
Yeah.
So you got to understand what structure you're going to put in place and under what terms you're going to take that capital on. And it really just it's the calculation of, okay, I know the risk and return of taking my own capital and doing this. I did it with my own money for the better part of 10 years, and was comfortable doing that. I actually never went to raise, I was never, my intention was never to raise money. In fact, some of the earliest podcasts I did, I talked about how I wasn't going to raise capital.
Mhm.
And I changed my mind because I found a group of people that would trust me under terms that I thought would enable our success. And it allowed me to do things at much greater scale. And so, the way I looked at it was certainly I'm giving up something. I mean, we have frictions through regulation and just involvement of investors that we would not have otherwise. But compared to the upside, I thought it was worth it, and it's turned out to be the case. And so for me, I've had a great experience in raising capital. I've really enjoyed it. It's been sharpening. It's been fun to have other people involved in what we're doing. I wouldn't change it. I loved it,
Mm.
and I also am fine, by the way, that and holding it loosely that if we didn't raise capital in the future and did it with our own, I think there's advantages to doing that. So I think either way, life's just about trade-offs, and so you just really need to determine what are the trade-offs and the risk reward you want to tolerate, and what are you trying to build? What are your goals? And then match the capital. The capital should always support the vision. It shouldn't be the vision, and I think that's
Mhm.
maybe an important thing that people lose track of. The capital shouldn't be driving the investment activity. The investment activity should
Right.
be supported by the capital.
Okay, gotcha. And if you had to give out like few commandments on how to surely fail at what you do, what what would them be? I think this would be really close to what Charlie Munger did in some commencement speech or whatever. But yeah, just curious to know.
Yeah. Okay. If I was going to surely fail, I mean, first of all, I would treat people as objects. I would be out for me and me alone, and I would be insecure about what I am, who I am, what I have, and I would be desperate for other people to affirm me. And I would just look at every person as some sort of piggy bank to either give me affirmation or give me money or give me opportunity or something. I think that's a pretty surefire way of having a miserable life and failing in business. Specifically on the business front, I would, gosh, if I was surefire way to fail, um, I would get access to a lot of capital quickly and without much experience in buying small businesses or operating small businesses. I would uh, try to buy the first or maybe the fifth thing that I look at without really understanding what I don't know, and then I would just launch headfirst into assuming that I knew how to operate it better than the people who'd been operating it for years and years and years before me. And I'd make a bunch of changes quickly to the business. And I think that's a pretty surefire way to lose all your money and lose it quickly. So yeah,
Nice.
that would be. I joke that the public markets for the most part are fairly efficient. And if you define efficiency as you really can't make or lose more money than the general market. I was joke that if I gave, it's a little bit different in micro caps, but if I gave most people $1 million and I said, hey, you can only buy companies that have a enterprise value more than, call it, $200 million or $300 million, and I'll give you 30 days, and I'll let you keep all the money you lose. So if you
Mhm.
lose $300,000, you get to keep $300,000, right? My guess is people couldn't lose very much money, right?
Mm, yeah.
Very difficult because the
Yeah.
markets are so efficient. In the small business world, if I said, hey, I'm going to give you $1 million, can you lose it in 30 days? You probably only need a couple days, maybe 5 or 6 days at most, and you can lose it all. It's a
Yeah.
highly inefficient market. And
Mhm.
so I would just caution people that um, a lack of efficiency means that talent really matters. And so you really got to have the skills to be able to go in a lot of different situations and understand, have humility, as we talked about, laying your ego down, trying to understand other people and listen, understand what they're really doing, and then just ultimately have judgment to know when to say, I disagree and we're going in a different direction.
Mhm. Cool. And I know, first of all, you don't have a financial background or business background. And we also have some listeners, namely some friends of mine, that don't have this financial yeah, background too. And so, how do you recommend like people that know nothing to start learning about the language of business and maybe they are not necessarily interested in investing or something like that, but they just want to have basic knowledge to be able to yeah discuss and understand.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on how much work they really want to do. I mean, there's lots of shortcuts on shortcuts. I mean, there's lots of books out there that are shortcuts on doing the actual primary work, and then there's even summaries of the books. So I mean, you can abstract away as much, as little time as you want. And I mean, I can tell you, they listen to a podcast and they're like, oh, I heard this principle and that principle, it must be true, right? Like, if they really want to do the work, I actually had a gentleman the other day approach me and he said, hey, I know I don't know. He's in actually in high school. And he said, I know I don't know what I'm doing. I really want to learn. I'm willing to do the work. What would you recommend I do? And I personally gave him copies of the Berkshire letters, copies of all the Howard Marks letters. I gave him a copy of The Outsiders, Will Thorndike's book. And I said, look, every time, I just said, start reading. And every time you come across a concept that you don't understand, be very vigilant on this. Stop immediately. Start Googling that concept. Try to learn that concept to where when you reread that section that you just came across, it makes sense now. Only then move on to the next concept. And by the way, if you do this, some of the early Berkshire letters, some of the early Howard Marks letters, it will take you weeks to read one letter. Weeks to read one letter. That is the best education you can possibly get. But all it is curiosity. Like, explore where you're curious. Try to figure out what's going on. How did other people make money? I mean, as dumb as that sounds, just as a base thing, it's like in The Outsiders, you have 8 chapters, and each one of the chapters is a different way of making money. Well, all of them were highly successful at what they did. There's not just one path. It's all about, okay, how do you take the principles and what's the thing that, how does it fit with you? And then how do you make it your own? But you got to understand what other people are doing first before you make it your own. So I would just say is read the greats, read the people who've done it, who've actually been generous enough to write about it. And then of course, explore branches out from there. And by the way, I think it's really healthy to disagree with your idols. I think it's really healthy to say, hey, Buffett said this, I disagree. Now, chances are, in all humility, he's right, you're wrong. Right? But if you really believe that he's wrong and you're right, you should explore that and really try to figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
See what happens.
Yeah, I think that is great advice. And just to wrap up, my last question, and I know this is one of your favorites too. If you were 19 years old, what advice would you give to yourself?
Yeah. It has to be. It has to be that I would explore who is Jesus. I mean, all the greats in history have studied Jesus, and we study them, but we don't actually study Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
And somebody challenged me. This is one of the things that got me. I thought I knew so much when I was in my 20s, not my like mid to late 20s. I thought I knew so much, and so much of the foundations of my life were just not built on solid principles, on what I thought to be true. And somebody challenged me. They were like, "Have you ever studied the life of Jesus?" Because I mean, look, the most successful leader in history by a country mile, not even close. No one's even approaching the number of followers and people through the years that have claimed to follow Jesus. And so, either you can look at Jesus and you can reject him and say, "Hey, I think he's nothing. I think he's an idiot. I think he's insane." That's totally fine. That's a determination that other people have come to. But you got to do something with Jesus. I think Bono said, right? He's liar, lunatic, or Lord. And I think that's probably the thing I would go back and tell my 19-year-old self is take the study of Jesus seriously and see where that leads you. And that would have been a help a lot earlier.
Yeah, definitely. Jesus would have like billions of followers on Instagram if he had an account. So,
well, maybe that's a good reason. If you want billions of followers on Instagram, maybe think about what Jesus said. So.
Yeah, actually, just a short follow up on that.
Yeah.
After listening to hours of your interviews, I said, okay, I really want to study Jesus. But then I looked at the Bible, and it's so huge and it's a bit intimidating. So, is there any reliable way to study Jesus without reading the Bible itself?
Well, okay, so the Bible itself it's broken down into what Christians call the Old Testament and the New Testament. So the way to think about it's one story. There's one story of the history of the world and of God, right? Who God is, what He's done, who we are, what He's done for us, and how we responded to that, right? So that's a way to think about the overarching story of the Bible that it teaches. the actual getting to know Jesus part, so Jesus had a very high view of the Old Testament. He said that it was the Word of God. So if we believe who Jesus is, who he says he is, then we've got to take seriously what he took seriously.
Mm,
But I would say to start, you can just read the Gospels, which is Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, which is the
mm,
start of the New Testament, which is very small. They're
mm,
not very long, and you can experience through those who Jesus is. Now, get a translation that's modern, updated. I'd recommend like NIV, maybe ESV, are the two translations I would look at. There's another translation called the Message, which is more of a it's not a literal translation. It's more of a conversational translation, but it's very modern, very approachable. And then I would say is I got a lot of value. There's a group out of Portland, Oregon called the Bible Project, and they make videos that explain. It's like really high level theology, and they make these videos that really simplifies it and is so powerful to understand the context of it. And if you just go on, I think it's just bibleproject.com or maybe it's bibleproject.org. I probably should know that, but I don't. But I've watched a bunch of those. I watched this with my kids. I think they're absolutely incredible. And then, by the way, if anybody has questions about this, like I'd be happy to have them DM me, contact me on LinkedIn, whatever it might be. I'd be happy to send them more resources. But I would just say is start with the four gospels, use a modern translation, and just understand like what did Jesus actually say? What did Jesus
mm,
actually do?
mm,
And then you can get into, is it historically accurate or not? Yeah, what is the evidence for it? There's a lot of books that you can dive into that are extremely good at helping to understand the context of it. That'd be where I
mm.
start.
Okay. Yeah, perfect. I think that's a wrap. I'm really grateful that you joined us today for this 1 hour conversation. And yeah, I will be sure to link everything I find about you and all like the letters and everything like that. So yeah, thank
Well,
you so
I
much.
really appreciate it, David. Thank you so much for having me on. And you are a remarkable guy, man. For how young you are, I just can't even believe it. Like you are so much further ahead than I was. At 20 years old, I was a freaking idiot. And anyway, I'm so impressed. I can't imagine when I'm 42 now. I'm like double your age. It's crazy. I'm so old now. I actually am old. Anyway, I still think of myself as young, but I'm actually not. I'm getting old. But anyway, I'm just so impressed with you, and I just want to encourage you. Thank you so much for everything you're doing. Couldn't be more impressed by you, and of course, truly, if I can ever do anything for you, never hesitate to reach out. Okay.
Nice. Perfect. Thank you so much.